Joining me now is Washington Congressman Adam Smith. He, of course, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee. Good to see you, Congressman. And look, you just heard the administration's top foreign policy officials equivocating on Trump's initial ceasefire goal. Do you buy what they're saying? I mean, what are your concerns with Trump reportedly pushing for a peace deal where Ukraine has to cede unoccupied territory to Russia?
Yeah, well, what they're saying is simply factually wrong. It's not what Trump said and did. I guess we can take it as good news that they're pivoting back to where Trump should have been during the summit. But the damage done by Trump changing what he was doing and saying that, wow, we're not going to work for a ceasefire, and also putting no pressure on Vladimir Putin during the course of that conversation. It would not have been that difficult for President Trump standing at that podium to say, Ukraine has a right to exist as a sovereign democratic country, and we and our European allies and others will help them defend that right, to stake out some ground, to not just roll over for everything that Putin is saying. But the one big factual piece is on the ceasefire. I mean, Trump came out and said, no, we're not going to pursue a ceasefire anymore. We're just going to go for a negotiated settlement. Now, it's good, from my perspective, to see Secretary Rubio and others walking back those comments because that's not where we should be. But President Trump set back the process with how he handled this summit.
Ukrainian President Zelensky and at least 7 top European leaders will meet with the president tomorrow at the White House, and Trump said it's up to Zelensky now to reach a peace deal. Rubio echoed his sentiments today, saying the U.S. isn't in a position to accept anything or reject anything because it's up to the Ukrainians. So what role is Trump playing, and what do you expect to come out of the Monday meeting?
Well, I think there's a couple of roles he could play. And the one, as I've said repeatedly, is to show strong support for Ukraine. Because the only way that Putin stops his war is if he thinks he can't take all of Ukraine. As long as that's still a possibility, he's going to keep pushing forward. One of the best ways that we can convince him of that is to show a united front with Ukraine, which, of course, President Trump and Vice President Vance very much have not done since they got into the White House. So turning that back around and showing a united front, treating Zelensky with respect, not the Oval Office fiasco that we had back in February, and also speaking up on behalf of our European partners and allies instead of denigrating them, shows a united front and also a pledge to give Ukraine the support, military support, they're going to need to defend themselves going forward. That's what can come out of this meeting that could be a positive in terms of pushing us towards peace. And then I think the other role, and this I think President Trump is right in, I think it is important for the U.S. to be talking with the Russians, to be talking with Putin. But talking with them is good. Rolling over for them and letting Putin dictate the terms of the conversation is not good. So that's the balance that I think we need to strike, and we'll see. I mean, it's better now than it was in February in terms of what the Trump administration is saying, but it's still got a long way to go in giving Ukraine the support it needs to pressure Putin into ending this war.
So my question to you, and while I think you're 100% accurate in what you're saying, what do you think the likelihood is of Donald Trump doing what you suggest, which is show tremendous support of Ukraine? Because in doing so, it is diametrically opposed to that which Putin wants, right? So that means if he shows support for Ukraine, he can't be showing support for Putin.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I could give a very long-winded answer with all sort of the pros and cons here, where on the one hand, but then again on the other, that it's really hard to say. I mean, the sad thing is, as was mentioned by your previous panel discussion there, Trump responds to flattery. And the Europeans and Zelensky now know that as well as Putin does. So they will try and do that. And maybe that'll be enough to get him to say the right thing. I mean, I think from a political standpoint, what Trump is aware of, if he is the president who gives Ukraine to Russia, that's going to make him look bad. And he sure as heck isn't going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for leading that outcome. So I think you've got that motivation, but then you've got all the backstory of Russian interference in our elections and how Trump has come to interpret that, as some sort of personal affront that he wants to undo. And then you've got the right-wing people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who are actually kind of rooting for Putin in this one because they think he's got a better way of governing than Zelensky in the West does. So it's a big mix of factors. We just have to hope that the European leaders and others in the White House, like Secretary Rubio, can get Trump to the right place on this one.
One more question on U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, who today said that Putin agreed to security protections for Ukraine during his talk with Trump, and that the U.S. and Europe are discussing a NATO-like security agreement for Ukraine. What do you make of Putin agreeing to that plan? And I mean, couldn't he simply guarantee not to invade Ukraine? Wouldn't that be, NATO-like plus?
No, but it's actually, if in fact it happened, it would be a huge step. Because remember, over the course of this conflict, one of the things that Putin has been insisting upon is a, quote, neutral Ukraine with basically no military support. So basically a big fat target for whatever he wants to do in the future. So if, in a private conversation, Putin relented on that demand and is willing to allow for a security, that'd be huge. But again, as he hadn't said that publicly. So I don't know what was said privately. If that was a pivot, if that was where he was at, that would certainly help. But it remains to be seen whether or not that's actually where it's at.
Congressman Adam Smith, I appreciate all your comments with us on the record, sir. Thank you so much.